Oh boy, I could talk all day about reserve fund studies. It is one of my favorite things about a condominium. Number one, it's a savings account. Everyone needs one. Single family homes should have one. I've made a reserve fund study for my house, actually. Of course, it's definitely not as professional as the ones that a condominium requires, but it gives me my roof is 10 years old and I maybe have 15 years left, and it gives me an idea of how much to save. So the beauty of owning a condominium is that you share the financial burden, but you do not share the decision-making burden. And that's where the reserve fund study comes in. So a reserve fund study is a visual inspection. And sometimes it's by an engineer, sometimes it's by a qualified consultant, but it is visual, and that is the most important part. For example, a boiler is meant to last 40 years. Now, a reserve fund study analyst or consultant, even the engineers, will put in boiler, 40 years, add this much money, and it will just populate their spreadsheet. They do not look at, has it been maintained well? Has it been cleaned? Has it been overhauled? Those items really have an impact on the longevity of the component. And if those things are not done, then we'll have to accelerate that 40 years and maybe replace it earlier. If it has been done to a high standard, perhaps we can delay that and keep the money in the bank. Those thresholds of 40 years for a boiler and 20 years for a roof, etc., are not written in stone. Almost as soon as a condominium reserve fund study is complete, it is expired. It's just like a budget where you're throwing a dart at the wall and you hope that it works out. And that is why the Condominium Property Act gives the board of directors the ability to accelerate or delay projects pursuant to what happens in life. A board of directors is meant to be your representative, but they are not meant to be experts. They're meant to rely on a condominium property manager and various engineers and consultants to give them good feedback so that they can make good decisions. So my favorite way of talking about a reserve fund is to remember that it's not in stone. If you see a special assessment several years down the road, that means that several years down the road, you will have various different reserve fund studies completed, and therefore they will maybe renege that. They will maybe delay it. They will maybe accelerate it. All those numbers will switch. A reserve fund study is good for 5 years. And once it is complete, then it lasts until the 5th year of the year end of the condominium. So I do get a lot of feedback on reserve fund studies. Oh, this is still good. Well, if it's August and your year end is May, then that reserve fund study is no longer good. And so we do like to encourage boards to be educated in taking the time to get the reserve fund study done. This normally takes 6 to 10 months, depending on how big your condominium is, and it is very important that it be done by a professional so that we can get the best overview we can and extrapolate all of those informations and hope that we can make a good recommendation or opinion for you based on operating reasonably or not. Does this sound familiar? Let us know if you have any other questions on reserve funds. We're always happy to chat.